Welcome to, oh, I thought it would start quicker. Hello and welcome everyone to our pruning webinar. My name is Alex Binck. I'm a community forester with the Sacramento Tree Foundation. I've been doing that work for about 3 years now. I'm also joined by Pamela Frickman Sanchez, who is our education programs manager. So as we were just going over, we'll kind of have questions through the Q&A feature, and we'll go over, have a little bit of a Q&A discussion at the end, maybe if we have time. So I also wanted to thank our partner SMUD. They provide a lot of support for our programs. They've been our partner for over 30 years and really wouldn't be where we are today without them. So thanks to SMUD. And yeah, this, as you might have guessed, if you're watching there, this is going to be recorded. We're going to post it on our YouTube channel. And I think maybe on our website too. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it'll definitely be available online in some form if you want to check it out at a future date. Okay, so let's go over the agenda today. Before we even get started, I want to clarify that this is a webinar that's focused on pruning young shade trees. So it's not necessarily focused on fruit trees, which some of the cuts and things might be similar. There'll be some shared skills, but for the most part, we're focused on shade trees, and some of the planning steps and goals of pruning are slightly different between those two. So if you have questions about fruit trees, we could maybe talk about that at the end, but for the most part, that's what we're going to cover here. So first of all, we're going to start by talking about planting, which is really important part of tree health. We're going to talk about safety because that's probably the most important piece out of all of this, is that you remain safe. I'd rather see your tree suffer and you stay safe than vice versa, right? And then we'll go through what we call the 5-step process of pruning to help you kind of organize and plan out how you're going to prune your tree. We'll talk about the nitty-gritty of how to actually make some of the pruning cuts you'll need to prune your trees. And then we'll also talk about some common pruning mistakes that you'll want to avoid. All right, so before we dive into all that stuff, this is kind of your cliff notes. If you are cramming for the pruning exam, this is what you're going to want to know. Or, if you have to jump off in the middle of the webinar and miss part of it, these are the most important points. You can start right away with pruning when trees are young. A lot of people think that you need to wait till they're a certain size, but pretty much the first winter after planting is a great time to at least start. And, you may only make a few small cuts, but if you come back to it every year, that little bit will get your tree growing healthy and looking beautiful in no time. So a lot of times the first year, it can be a little bit confusing because, the tree hasn't yet been pruned, the way that you want it to be. But every year, once you start, you'll probably have to do less and less as the tree grows, because you'll be guiding the way it grows from that point onward. And finally, like I said before, we're focused on young trees here in this webinar. And the reason for that is when trees get bigger and taller and heavier, it can be quite dangerous to prune them if you don't have the proper tools and experience. So if you don't have both feet on the ground, if you're tempted to get out a ladder or something like that, just don't, because that could be quite dangerous, and it's better to depend on a professional for that point. Okay, so why do we prune trees? Well, there are a lot of reasons, but it's one thing is that we want to keep them healthy, and the reason for that is trees do a lot for us. A lot of people don't realize how important trees are to our health and well-being. A lot of people know that they provide shade and that they're beautiful, and those things are great. We love that about them. But to me, the biggest thing is the physical and mental health of people who live around them, through cleaner air or just, relaxation and beauty. All those things have a really big impact on our health. And so keeping the trees healthy is absolutely worth the effort, even if you have to spend a little time on it here and there. Okay, so let's dive into the planting. So you might be a little confused about why I'm talking about planting during a pruning webinar, but there's two reasons. Number one, a well-planted tree is going to be healthier. It's going to grow faster. It's going to do everything that a tree does better. And in general, it'll often be easier to prune because it'll grow straight rather than crooked and gnarled. Also, when you plant a tree, the first thing you prune is actually the roots. That's an important piece that a lot of people don't realize. When you get trees that have been in a container for a few years, oftentimes the roots will be circled around. And if those are left in place like that, they can actually cause a tree to choke and strangle. So we really want to correct that. Don't be afraid to dig in there, pull that apart, or make some trimming as necessary. We're not going to go into too much detail on planting, but I did want to point out that we have a great planting video on our website at sactree.org. So definitely feel free to check that out if you're going to be doing any planting in the near future, or if you just did some planting, if you want to double check what you did, and there could be some slight adjustments you want to make after the fact too. So following the instructions will result in a well-planted tree that's just at the right height with mulch around it, and it'll grow faster, look nicer, and be healthier for you for the rest of its life. So that's the goal here. Okay, so let's dive into the above ground pruning stuff. So first of all, I want to go into a little more detail about why we prune. There's actually several reasons. Number one is to improve tree health. And that could be removing diseased areas or shaping the structure of the tree so that it's less likely to break or drop limbs in the future. It could be providing clearance. A lot of times you'll see if you walk around in your neighborhood, you'll see all these trees in people's front yards, and there's an area under the tree that has no branches. In most cases, that's not how trees grow naturally. That's something that people achieve through pruning. So if you want to be able to walk around or see under the tree, or if a tree's next to a street and you want to be able to park under it, that's one purpose of pruning. And finally, pruning can also increase beauty just by affecting how the tree grows, affecting its shape. To me, that's kind of a lesser piece of it compared to the other things, but it's certainly an added benefit of doing proper pruning. So all those reasons mean that it's absolutely worth it to put in the work when the tree is young to kind of start that process rather than waiting until later where it's going to be a little bit more difficult. Okay, so the first thing you want to do before you even start making any cuts or even thinking about what cuts you're going to make is to identify your tree, because each tree has a different shape, it has a different growth pattern, it has different pests and diseases. And so it's really important to know what you're working with before you get started. You want to know how big the tree is going to grow, because if a tree is small and bushy, you may not need to worry about future big limbs hanging that might be more of a hazard. Or if it's a tree like the tree on the left, which is a deodar cedar, it's going to be very upright, pyramidal in shape, wider at the bottom, pointy at the top, versus something like a pistache that's round. All of these different shapes and forms are going to require slightly different techniques when it comes to pruning. If you're not sure what kind of tree you have, which is very common, most people don't know more about trees than they need to. You can go onto our website, sactree.org/shady80, and we have a sort of a database there of 80 trees that we recommend for the region. So you can take a look at some pictures, see if that matches what your tree looks like. Or if it's not in there or you're not sure, you can also reach out to us, and that's part of what we do as well, is help people identify what trees they have so that they can help care for them better. Okay, so let's start with some things that you do not want to do when it comes to pruning. First of all, as I said before, if you can't reach what you're trying to prune, just go ahead and hire a professional, because it's not worth the risk to your physical safety and health. There's a lot of people that fall every year, or if you're dealing with heavier branches, it's very easy for that to fall on you, right? That's another way people get injured during pruning. Another thing that's unfortunately still very common is what's called topping, which is basically the indiscriminate removal of branches from all around the canopy, not really cut in any particular place, just kind of wherever, you feel like you just cut it off there. And unfortunately, that's often done because people think it will reduce the risk of the tree, but not only is it extremely damaging to the tree, and many trees that are cut this way will end up dying in future years, but it also actually makes the tree more risky and more likely to be a hazard. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. And then finally, we never recommend using paint or sealant on tree wounds anymore, especially if you talk to somebody who, maybe a long time ago or who's been in the industry for a long time and hasn't stayed up on the newest research. Sometimes people will still recommend this, but the modern research shows it has no benefit or is often harmful. So it's really more important, if you want the tree to heal properly, to make the proper cut in the proper location, and avoid making large cuts that are more difficult for the tree to heal from. Okay, so here's some things that you do want to do. Again, prioritize safety. Make sure that you have the proper protective equipment that's appropriate for whatever you're doing. If you're cutting something that's over your head, as I said, you might want to wear a hard hat just in case it falls. You'd be surprised at how small something can be that will cause a concussion. My fiance actually once got a concussion from a football, which is not heavy at all, but if it hits you in the head in the right way, it can be dangerous. The other thing is eye protection. If you're doing anything where pieces of wood could be flying out and splinters, definitely don't want that in your eye. So that's something to consider as well. You want to make sure that your tools are sharp. That's going to make your job easier. It's going to make sure that the tree is, the cut is clean and easier for the tree to heal. Don't prune more than 25% of the tree in a year. So if this is something to keep in mind as you're going through, to kind of prioritize the most important cuts first. And then when you get to about 25%, you can stop, no problem, wait till next year. Most things are not that urgent that they have to be dealt with right away. And then of course, start pruning the tree when it's young. That way you can shape its growth. It's a lot easier to reach. It's a lot easier to guide the tree's growth. And then once it gets older and it's too tall for you to work on, hire a professional. Ideally, you want to hire somebody who's ISA certified. That's the main professional organization that ensures people have the proper credentials among arborists. So if you are interested in doing that, you can find on our website, sactree.org/hire. There's some resources about how to connect with a local arborist who has the proper certifications. Because unfortunately, there are a lot of people in the tree industry who may claim to know what they're doing, but if they don't have those credentials, it's hard to be sure. And there's a lot of people that don't actually know much about pruning that are doing it, unfortunately. Okay, so when to prune? We kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, and you might be able to guess just from the timing of our webinar here. But the best time to prune is actually right now during the winter. And there's a couple reasons for that. The tree is dormant, so you're not cutting into a tree that's actively flowing with sap. It's not going to instantly sprout and start, regrowing right away, which is good. The growth response will be a little more controlled. It's also very easy to see the tree right now, especially if you have a deciduous tree, meaning a tree that sheds its leaves. You can see kind of where all the branches are and the shape of those branches much more easily than during the summer when they're covered by leaves. If you were to prune during other times of the year, it can cause a little bit more of a sprouting response, which can be undesirable. Really though, you for certain types of pruning, you can do it during the growing season. Mainly, things that are imminent hazards, or if there's like a broken branch, you're basically turning that ragged, broken branch into a clean cut. That's only going to help the tree. Or if there's suckers and other little things that you want to address at the base of the tree, like little sprouts and things, those are fine to remove any time of year. It's just when you're doing kind of major pruning on the tree, best to do that during the winter. And again, I'll note that fruit trees can be slightly different in that respect. So sometimes you want to prune those at a different time of year. Okay, so let's look at our methods of pruning here. So again, don't remove more than 25% of the tree. If you go over that amount, first of all, it's going to stress the tree out because it won't have as many leaves next year and it won't be able to grow as much. But also, the more you cut off, the more likely it is to kind of cause what are called water sprouts or suckers to kind of pop up all over the tree. And those will kind of just be uncontrolled growth that doesn't really help the tree grow into a healthy structure, and probably won't be according to your plans for it either. So if we do a little more trimming, limited trimming of the tree each year, we'll avoid that issue. To that end, it can be helpful to keep the trimmings and the brush that you cut off the tree in one pile. And that makes it really easy to visually compare that pile with the branches that are left on the tree. So you can say, okay, that looks like about 25%. Maybe it's time to stop. Or, oh, maybe that only looks like 10, 15%. I could keep going now. Take your time. Keep in mind that once you make a cut, you can't go back, right? So before you make a cut, it's always fine to pause and consider and say, is this the one I want to remove, or maybe a different one would be better. We also recommend pruning systematically, and we have a 5-step process that we'll go through to help you kind of prioritize and figure out which cuts to make when and where. And then keep in mind that structural pruning is a multi-year process. Again, some trees, it could be as quick as 2 years and you're done. Others might take a little longer, up to 8 years. Just depends on the tree and how it's growing. Okay, so let's go over those 5 steps that I mentioned. Breaking it down that way is really going to help you know where to begin, and like I said, what cuts to prioritize first, and how to know which branches to leave and which branches to remove. Okay, so first step, which I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, is to remove anything that's just not a healthy growth pattern for the tree. That's kind of just stuff that's going to be in the way of it being healthy. That could be broken limbs, just kind of tidying that up, turning it into a neat, clean cut that's easier for the tree to heal. Could be dead material if the tree was stressed and any branches died. Those can be good habitat for little fungal organisms and things that might attack the tree, so it's best to remove those. Water sprouts, which are basically, if you look at this second picture here, these little vertical sprouts that are coming straight up from the branch. That's not really contributing to the tree's overall form. We just want to get rid of that stuff. And then similarly, suckers, which are essentially the same thing, but coming from the base of the tree. And those would grow into multiple trunks in the future if we let them. So generally, we want to remove that stuff first. Second, and maybe most important step here, is to establish a single central leader. So a central leader is basically the tallest, straightest, healthiest branch on a tree, the one that's going to grow straight up, and eventually, especially on a small tree, that's going to be the main trunk of the tree in the future. If you have your little 5-foot tall sapling, you may want the trunk to keep going straight up into the air for some time before branching out. So that's what we're trying to establish here. If you look at the pictures here, this is same type of tree. I think it's a maple, and they're about the same size, but you might notice a big difference here, which is the tree on the left has this fork down low here, versus the tree on the right pretty much goes straight up. And generally, this is preferable on the right. And we'll talk about why here in a second. But when you have this type of forking, which we call a double leader or a codominant stem, there's a few different ways to refer to it. It's just much more likely to split compared to one main trunk. And one reason for that, I think this picture on the right here is a really good demonstration, is that a lot of times the narrowness of the angle there is going to cause bark to become what we call included inside that connection there. And what that means is these two limbs are not connected during this area. There's bark separating them. And so all of the weight of these branches is being supported by the lower part of the union. And as the tree gets bigger, more and more weight is going to be placed on that. As opposed to a more horizontal branch, the area all around that branch can keep growing wider to help support it as it gets bigger. So it's very easy to address this when the tree is young. But if you don't address it, it can lead to big problems. So especially like this picture here, this is an ash tree. You could see that you have some of that included bark up here, and then in the wind, or maybe just from the weight of the branch, a crack has started to develop. And that is a very serious hazard. If you had a tree like that, you'd want to get that get the attention of a professional arborist immediately, because that could be dangerous. So, basically, you select your central leader, figure out which one's the straightest and most healthy that you want to become the main trunk. And then any branches that are kind of vertical, that are competing with that one, that are similar in size, you either want to remove those or reduce them in size so that your central leader will grow more and those other competing limbs will grow less. Okay, step 3. Select and establish the lowest permanent branch. So before we talk about this, it could be helpful to define what is a permanent branch and what is a temporary branch. So again, like I was talking about earlier, when you look at your classic, front yard tree or whatever, or in a park or wherever, typically there's no lower branches on the tree. And again, that's because those have been removed through pruning. That's not the way most trees grow naturally. And so if we want to create clearance, we need to decide how much clearance do we need. And that's going to depend, it's kind of up to you. It depends how much clearance you need. If you just want to be able to walk under the tree, maybe you want the branches up above head height. If the tree is near a road that trucks go down, you may need to have 12, 14 feet of clearance, something like that. Or if the tree is in a big lot and you have plenty of space, you don't really need to walk around under it. You can also leave those lower branches if you like how they look. It's totally up to you. But this is a step where you look at the tree and say, okay, that branch there, that's where I want the bottom of the canopy to be in the future. And that's going to be the lowest permanent branch. All the branches below that are going to be temporary. One thing to note about that is if your tree's small, it may not have the lowest permanent branch yet. Maybe that's something that's going to grow in the future. So keep that in mind as well, that this is a step that primarily comes into play once your tree is more in kind of its teenage years where it's getting a bit taller. So the flip side of that is that once you've selected the lowest permanent branch, then you know that all the branches below that are what we call temporary branches. These are branches that are really important for the tree. They help it grow. But we're also planning to remove them eventually. And so we want to manage them in some ways to make that easier on ourselves and easier on the tree. Typically what's done with temporary branches is you kind of shorten them back so that they don't grow too big, so they're not in the way, and so that they stay small. The more you trim, when you trim them back, the tree will put less energy and growth into that branch, and it'll stay smaller for longer, and that way gives the tree more time to grow this nice big canopy up above, and then you can remove the branch when it's still small. That way you don't harm the tree by making a big wound by cutting a big branch. So this is an example here, lower branches left on to promote trunk taper. That basically means making the trunk thicker and stronger, and to shade the trunk. That's another piece that I didn't mention before, is that trees can actually get sunburned just like people can. And so if you remove all the branches low down before it has this nice big shady canopy up above, and then the sun is shining directly on the trunk all day, that can be very harmful to it, and it can kill the bark and cause a lot of problems. So typically you're going to shorten some of these or all of them, depending on the situation, to about a foot. And that way they'll still be there to provide some shade and help the tree grow, but they won't be getting too big. Okay, and then our fifth and last step here is to select your side branches, or scaffolding branches they're also called. This is another step that's probably not going to happen until a little bit later in the tree's development, because you have to have multiple permanent branches to select from at that point. So the idea here is, as the tree grows, especially for a larger tree, it's going to be carrying a lot of weight on its branches. And so you want to select the healthiest, strongest ones, make sure they're evenly spaced around the tree so that it can safely bear that weight. So a lot of times if there's little scraggly things, stuff that's not in a position where you want a branch to be, you can remove those, making sure to leave enough around the tree to create a healthy canopy later on. If this isn't done, sometimes it can lead to overcrowding of branches. That basically just makes them a little bit weaker and more prone to breaking off. So this picture here shows kind of what I mean there. That's an ornamental pear, which is a type of tree that's very susceptible to having overly crowded branches like this. Okay, so another thing that's good to keep in mind here is, again, to know what tree you're working with. There's two main forms, and it's, it's not as much of a dichotomy as a spectrum here, but a tree can either be decurrent, which means that's like this valley oak here, very spreading multi-branch form with no general defined leader up at the top of the canopy, or it can be called excurrent. And this is another type of oak, but very different shape. This is a pin oak. What that means is the tree will generally naturally develop a strong central leader on its own. So you may be wondering, well, hang on then, if that tree doesn't have a central leader, then how am I gonna go through step 2 and determine where the central leader is? Well, you could still, a lot of trees, even decurrent trees, will have a central leader when they're young. And even if they don't, it can be a good idea to establish one. And the main reason there is that the further up you can keep that trunk straight up without any splits, the better supported that spreading canopy will be once it develops. So it's not about preventing the tree from going to its natural form. It's more about making sure it has a really good foundation to support its eventual shape. Okay, so now that we've gone over the 5 steps, we have a couple of videos to demonstrate how to actually execute them. So let's take a look at that.
Start by removing any dead or broken branches, water sprouts growing straight up, or suckers growing up from the roots. This leaves you with a clean slate of good branches to evaluate. Stand back and look at your tree from all angles. Know what type of tree you're pruning and consider what will be the mature size and shape of your tree to help guide your decisions. Select a single central leader, the main trunk that is the tallest and most upright. Prune off or reduce competing trunks. Trees with multiple leaders, called codominant stems, are not as safe structurally. Stay safe and keep both feet on the ground. Pole loppers come in handy for this task, but if you still can't reach, avoid the ladder and hire a certified arborist. Select and establish the lowest permanent branch. Look around your tree. How much clearance under the tree do you want? Tree branches do not grow up as the tree grows taller, they stay in place. So if you have a small tree, the lowest permanent branch may not even be present yet. Above the lowest permanent branch, you'll eventually select and establish permanent side branches. Your tree might still be too small to have these, but once it grows tall enough, choose branches that are well spaced and no more than a third of the trunk diameter. Everything under the lowest permanent branch and in between permanent side branches is a temporary branch. These branches protect young tree trunks from sunburn and promote a thicker, stronger trunk. Leave them if you can, but if they get too long, cut them to about 1 foot, then remove them completely in a couple years. With temporary branches, use the rule of thumb. Prune off anything that's already larger than your thumb to avoid creating a larger wound later. As you go along, make a pile of your trimmings to make it easier to visualize how much you've already removed. Don't cut more than 25% of the live canopy in any 1 year.
Okay, excellent. So that was Pam there doing a little trimming for this this valley oak. You can see the main thing she did was we had some pretty big suckers or sprouts from the base of the tree there in the beginning. So she started by removing those because we generally want this tree to have just 1 trunk, not multiple. Then she took a look at the top of the tree, selected what was her central leader, this kind of tall branch here, and then noticed that there were a couple of branches that were kind of in that direction that might be competing with it. And she decided to remove those, and then also took a look at some of these temporary branches down lower and kind of trimmed back some of the bigger ones. And then, that was probably about 25%. So that's a good place to stop for the year. And we'll definitely want to come back to this tree next year. Some of these other side branches might need to be trimmed back at that point. Some of these temporary branches, I mean, And then hopefully by then we'll be starting to get a little bit more canopy up here. Another thing I think that's really cool about this tree, and this is not totally related to pruning, but you can see the difference in growth between when the tree was in the container. You can see all this little dense brushy stuff here versus these long straight sprouts once it went in the ground. And that's a sign that the tree was much healthier and happier once it was planted, which I think is interesting. But that's why it makes it a little bit easier to prune if your tree is healthy. Whoops.
Start by removing.
Not what I want to do. Okay. So let's talk about the nitty gritty of how to actually make those cuts. Now that we know, roughly what our plan is going to be, how to decide where to cut and which branches to cut, let's talk about, the mechanics of actually doing that. So first of all, you want to start with the right tools. You want to make sure that your tools are sharp before you begin, both because it's going to be easier and safer for you, but also a sharp blade is going to cut more smoothly, and then the tree will be able to heal from that more easily. So either use tools that are new, or it's also not that hard to get older tools sharpened if need be. You can either do that yourself, or there's a lot of folks around Sacramento who will do that for you for a small fee. Also make sure that you're using the correct size of tool for the size of cut that you make. These hand pruners here, that's probably what you're going to use about 90% of the time, especially on small trees. Those are great for clipping, little twigs and things, especially low to the ground. You can also use these loppers here. The long handle helps you get more leverage to cut through some slightly thicker stuff. And then when you're doing, bigger branches that you can't get through with those types of tools, you can also get a pruning saw here. But probably that's one that you'll use less frequently, especially if you do your pruning every year and you trim back things before they get bigger. Saw is not as often needed. Okay, so we got another video here for us to watch on how to make a clean cut.
Clean pruning cuts made in the right location allow the tree to close pruning wounds, which prevents pests and diseases from taking hold. Branches should be pruned back to the trunk or to another limb. Make the cut just outside the branch collar, the slightly swollen area where the branch attaches to the trunk. Here's another example. In situations where you don't need to remove the entire branch, make a reduction cut back to a branch that is at least 1/3 of the diameter of the branch being removed.
All righty. So they mentioned 2 different types of cuts there, and those are the ones that you'll mainly be using when pruning small trees. One cut that we probably use most often, especially on small trees, is called a removal cut. And basically that just means you're removing an entire branch all the way back to the trunk. So the important things about making a removal cut are making sure that you do it in the right place. The tree has an organ on it at the base of the branch where it connects to the trunk called the branch collar. And the branch collar is basically this swollen section. And that is an organ that helps the tree heal from damage. It's there naturally in case the limb snaps off. It will help it close over and keep pests and fungal infections and things out of the trunk. So by cutting right up to that point, we're going to give the tree the best chance of healing. If you were to cut into that, not only does that damage that healing capacity, but it also leaves a larger wound, which is not ideal. And then if you cut further out, that can lead to some other complications later, like sprouting and things like that. So ideally, we want to cut right against the branch collar, kind of perpendicular to the axis of the branch, so that it's the smallest circle we can possibly make when we're removing that, because the smaller the wound is, the easier it is to heal. So these are just some pictures showing what I mean here. You can see the branch collar is up here. We're cutting right outside of it. We're leaving a small circular wound, and then that's going to heal hopefully heal quickly and prevent decay from getting into the trunk. That's why it's so critical when doing removal cuts, because, you know, it's one thing if decay gets into the branches, you know, those are kind of not as important to the trees, not as essential, I should say, to the tree's survival. But if the trunk starts to decay, that can be a serious issue. So we want to give the tree the best chance possible to heal from this. So this is just another diagram that shows kind of what we're talking about here. If you're removing a dead branch, you know, kind of same thing, you want to cut into, just remove right up to where the live tissue is. If you're doing a living branch, you cut right at the edge of the branch collar there. There's also what's called the bark branch ridge, which is the attachment point between a branch and a trunk. And that's one of the things that makes those wider angled branches a little bit stronger than something that's a narrow angle, like more upright, because you don't have that bark branch ridge there. So this is just a little bit of a more photographic example of that. You can see the bark branch ridge here, and a little bit of a branch collar. Some trees, the branch collar can be less obvious. And in that case, you can kind of estimate where it is, but the idea is to cut where there's going to be the smallest, most circular wound. So that's kind of right here, even though the branch collar isn't super obvious on this tree, we can kind of look at, okay, that's probably about where it is. And then if we cut here, we're making that small circular wound that's going to heal easily. Okay, so that's all fine and good for smaller branches, right? We can use our pruners there, no problem. Easy enough, we're done. If we're having to remove a slightly larger branch, there can be an additional problem that will happen, which is that the weight of the branch when it's coming off can cause it to break as you're cutting it. And then as it breaks, a little strip of bark can kind of pull off of the tree, and that's going to make the wound bigger and harder for the tree to heal. So to avoid that issue, we want to do what we call a 3-step cut. So this is a little diagram of how that works, but basically you make one cut kind of a little bit out from where you want your final cut to be. And that you make a little notch about 1/3 of the way into the branch at the bottom. Then you make your second cut a little further out. That's to remove the weight from the limb. And as you're cutting this, you'll usually see that little bark stripping issue that'll happen. It'll go down the branch, but it'll stop where you've made your first little cut there. And once you've removed most of that weight, then you can make your final cut safely. And because this little section here will be, you know, lightweight, it won't tear into the branch collar and make that, that wound harder to heal. One thing to note is the bigger the branch is, the closer this needs to be to this thing, because I've done that before where I did this, but I made this little section a little too long and it tore again when I made the final cut. So keep that in mind as well. So let's watch a video of that in practice.
Larger branches require a couple extra steps to ensure the weight of the falling branch doesn't tear out the wood below as it falls. First, use a pruning saw to make a notch in the bottom of the branch, 6 to 12 inches away from the trunk, only cutting about 1/3 of the way through. Next, move out an additional inch or so and cut from the top all the way through the branch. Make your final cut in the proper location just outside the branch collar.
Okay, so I don't know if you guys saw it there, but when Pam did make the second cut there, if you were sharp-eyed, you could see that branch or the bark tearing off there, but it went and it stopped right at that first cut, just like we intended. And that means that when we make our final cut, the remaining portion of the tree will be a nice, clean, circular wound, easy to heal, no issues there. Okay, so let's talk about our other main type of cut, which is a reduction cut. And this is a slightly less common form of cut, but you definitely will want to know about how to do it. The idea of a reduction cut is basically we are reducing the size of an existing branch rather than removing it. And there's an important distinction to make here between a reduction cut and what's called topping, which I mentioned earlier. Whenever you make a reduction cut, you are cutting back to another branch here, just like it shows in the lower right picture. And what the purpose of that is, first of all, there's often a little bit of a branch collar there, and that's going to help the tree heal. But also, once you've removed that, the new branch will take over growth from the tree, as opposed to just leaving a stub that's kind of that. If there's no direction for the tree to grow, it will just kind of sprout all over the place. So let's talk about that a little bit more. So when you top a branch, for example, in the upper left here, just cut it wherever, no particular place. What happens is all of the dormant buds that are in that branch are going to all sprout and go all over the place. And that's going to create this very bushy, dense growth that's not a healthy way for a young tree to be growing. Because a lot of those sprouts there now are going to be coming from the side of the branch. They're not very well attached. And as they get bigger and heavier, they're more likely to snap. In contrast, if we do a reduction cut, we cut back to this little twig here, then all the new growth is going to be channeled into that branch. That branch has a better attachment as well to the bigger branch, and so it'll be safer for the future. And also that way we can control how the tree is going to grow and respond rather than having this uncontrolled chaotic growth. So one thing to know about reduction cuts is even when you do it right, it's still opening the tree up to decay. And this is true of removal cuts as well. But if you see this picture here, this is a fruit tree, I think, of some kind, and they wanted to reduce this branch for whatever reason. So they made the cut here. Pretty good cut, looks clean, and it's about in the right place. But when you look at, they split the wood open here, you can see that decay is starting to get into the tree. And why that happened is this is a fairly large wound for a tree to heal. The bigger it is, as I've mentioned before, the longer it takes to heal. And that means that it's more likely that decay can start to get into the trunk. And once it gets in there, it can be hard for the tree to handle, sort of goes systemic. So typically a good rule of thumb to follow when you're making pruning cuts is anything that's less than 2 inches in diameter, usually most trees should heal from that just fine. You don't need to worry too much about making those cuts. If it's 2 to 4 inches, definitely think twice about that. You should have a good reason for making a cut of that size, and make sure that it's necessary, because ideally, it's best to avoid those. And then if the cut is over 4 inches, you should have a really good reason for doing that. Like maybe there's some kind of imminent safety hazard. Basically, whatever the alternative is worse. And I would say, if you're thinking about making a cut that's 4 inches or more, maybe what you should be doing instead is doing a reduction cut a little bit further out on the limb, and see if that can accomplish your goals instead, because that's usually going to involve making some more smaller cuts rather than one bigger one. Okay, so let's watch a video of a tree where some removal cuts were necessary. So some trees have a really nice, central leader, like I mentioned before. Others kind of have what you see here, where it's kind of just going out all over the place. And so if we were to remove all of these competing leaders, not much of the tree would be left. So instead of removing them, Pam decided here to do several reduction cuts instead. So let's watch that. Okay, so yeah, like I said, the basic idea there was we want to promote the growth of the central leader, which I guess Pam decided this one was the best candidate here. One thing that's interesting about this tree is the central leader is not super straight, and that's fine. In this case, there wasn't probably a perfect branch, and a lot of times it doesn't matter that much which one you pick, because the tree is so small, it's gonna change and grow a lot, and hopefully straighten out a little bit as it grows. If we were to, as I said before, if we were to remove all of the competing leaders, we'd be way over our 25%, and we'd be setting the tree back a lot in terms of its growth, and potentially causing some reactionary growth, lots of sprouting everywhere that we wouldn't be able to control. So instead of doing that, we're going to cut back to a smaller branch, all these different competing leaders. And that way the tree will focus more of its growth into this central leader that we want to grow and less into these. And then most likely in a few years, we'll come back and completely remove these branches so that there's just one trunk and then our canopy is up overhead. Okay, so let's talk about some common mistakes in pruning, things to avoid. Number one, flush cuts. So this goes back to what I was talking about with the branch collar, that swollen section where a branch connects to the trunk or a bigger branch. You never want to cut into that because, as I said before, that's an important organ that helps the tree heal. It's going to have a lot harder time if you cut into that. And on top of that, just the area of the wound is much larger. And so again, trees heal from the outside in. So, you know, that bark from the outside has to grow all the way over this huge wound. And by the time it gets there, my guess is you'll be starting to see some decay in this trunk, and that's going to be dangerous for this tree. Other things, stubs. So this is the opposite of that, where we leave too much material, right? If you leave a stub or a small section of limb like this, what you see here, there's just a lot of dormant buds in this wood, and those are all going to come to life and try to regrow new branches. But because there wasn't one to take over the growth, it's just kind of this chaotic, haphazard water sprouting. And in addition, you could see that because this tree wasn't cut back to the branch bark collar, it had a harder time healing. And you can see this little white fungus has gotten into the limb, which is going to cause that decay to get in there, which is dangerous for the tree, and it's going to make it more of a hazard down the road because this branch is going to be weak because it'll be decaying on the inside. The other issue that you can have is, you know, torn branches like this. If something like this were to happen, basically you just want to cut it back a little bit more cleanly so it's easier for it to heal. Topping, mentioned this a couple times now, but this is unfortunately one of the most common styles of pruning still to this day in Sacramento, and it's extremely damaging to the tree. It doesn't make the tree healthier or better in any way, and actually makes it more dangerous to, you know, your home and to people that are around the branches. So, you know, what are some common reasons that people top trees? Number one, as I said before, they think they're reducing the hazard of the tree, especially if you have a big tree close to a home. You might be nervous about, you know, the branches being close by there, but this is not the way to solve that problem. You're much better off consulting a professional certified arborist in that case, and they can advise you about, you know, if any risk reduction is necessary, how to do that. But when you top your tree, you're going to have all these little sprouts growing back. As I said before, they're not well attached anymore to that branch because they're coming off the side there, and those would be much more likely to snap in the future. The other reason people do topping sometimes is with these crepe myrtles. That's a common tree in our area. People have a perception that it will cause them to flower more, but it's actually not true. When they've done research, the flowering will be better, especially in subsequent years if you don't top them. Sometimes you can get a little, because of all this sprouting response, you can get sort of an initial flush of flowers, but then year 2 and 3, the tree is less healthy. It's not going to flower as much as if you had just left it alone or pruned it correctly. Another tree in our area that's commonly topped is fruitless mulberries. Those are very vigorous growing trees. You often see this stuff where there's all this scarred wood and then all these big tall branches coming out. And what's going to happen is this is going to start to decay, and you're going to have these big heavy branches that will, you know, not only be not attached strongly due to just their shape and where they're positioned, but also they're going to be attached to this big rim, which is going to, or limb that's going to start to decay. And that's going to be, in some cases, a dangerous situation. On the flip side, there is another technique which we don't really use or recommend called Polarting. This is a common thing that's done in Europe. And I think maybe our topping, you know, is sort of a failed version of that or something like that. But Polarting is basically where you cut the tree every single year at the same point, and that creates a lot of smaller cuts, and they tend to scar over, which prevents the decay from getting into the limb. And because you're cutting it every year, those branches aren't getting big enough to become dangerous. So you don't really see this in Sacramento very often, but there are a few examples here and there. To me, it looks kind of weird. I'm not sure what the purpose of it is, and it's a lot of work. So I wouldn't recommend doing it, but it is different than topping, and it can be an acceptable pruning practice in that it's not overly harmful to the tree or dangerous, in contrast to topping. Another thing that you might see here and there, this isn't as common as topping, but you definitely see it around, is what's called lion tailing. And that's basically where you remove all the interior small branches all the way out to the tip, so that your tree ends up looking a bit like a lion's tail, right? With this little bushy pom-pom thing on top, and then just all this empty branch here. And this is also extremely harmful to the tree. Never should have this done. I think it's mainly done for aesthetic reasons, but I'm not really sure. But the issue here is that this part of the tree previously, when there were a lot of branches all around here, was somewhat protected from the wind by the neighboring branches. But now when a big gust comes along, this little spindly branch here is just going to be whipping around, and it's very likely to snap. So never want to do that. This is quite different from what we talked about earlier, where we may want to remove some of our main branches from the trunk to space them out more. So that's not the same as removing all of them the way that's been done here. Okay, we got another video for us to watch, just some examples to go through here. Oh, it didn't play. Uh-oh. There we go. Okay, so that was just an example of maybe a slightly easier tree that was already in pretty good shape when we started. So I don't know if you saw there, but basically what Pam did was she started by removing some water sprouts, some sort of little vertical growing sprouts that were coming off the trunk that we don't want to develop into up and down branches that are going through the canopy. She probably looked at the central leader, decided it looks good. There was already, I don't know if we can get a better view of it while I'm talking here. Let's see. No, it's just black. Okay. But if you remember, at the top of the tree, there was already one branch that was going straight up and just kind of some side branches from there. So there really wasn't anything necessary to be done to establish the central leader. And many times that'll happen, especially for those more upright varieties of tree. And then she just removed one temporary branch that was getting a little bit too big, again, with the goal in mind of, we want to remove this branch eventually. Let's do it now before it gets bigger and becomes more damaging to the tree. And then she also took a look at some of the other smaller temporary branches and decided to shorten them a little bit. So that's a pretty typical case. That might be all you need to do. And then you just come back next year, see how things have developed, maybe make a few more cuts, and then before you know it, you'll have a beautiful young shade tree. Okay, so let's go through some wrap up here. Remember, pruning starts with the roots. Make sure before you start to know your tree, have the proper tools, and know your limitations, and always keep safety in mind. Follow the 5 steps to prioritize which cuts to make first. And make sure that you're staying under that 25% of the canopy each year. And then always think twice before cutting. You can always take it off later. Sometimes you might decide to do something, wait and see how something develops and remove it next year. But if you cut something off now, you can't put it back, right? So with that, I think we'll open it up for some questions. Thanks for coming, everybody. If you want to learn more, there's also our website, sactree.org/prune, which has some written materials to remind you of some of the stuff that you learned today. And again, if you have any questions, you can email me, alex@sactree.com, that come up in the future. So yeah, did we have any questions we want to talk about, Pam?
Hey, Alex, great job. Thank you. One question that just came up that I haven't typed the answer to is about staking. And we had a couple other questions about staking too. So I think that would be worth it to answer. The question is there a best time to remove the stakes from the trees to promote a thicker trunk?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't think there's a really simple answer to it, to be honest with you. It kind of depends on the situation. So the idea with staking is when your tree first goes in the ground, it's not really attached. And so we need to hold it in place in case there's wind. And by the way, stakes are not always necessary, especially if you have a very small bushy tree. Sometimes they might not need stakes at all. And I always recommend use the least amount of staking that's necessary to keep the tree from toppling over. That's the best approach. And so basically what you want to do is plant your tree. A lot of times a tree will come with what's called a nursery stake, which is meant to protect it and transport. Go ahead and remove that right away. If it seems like it's leaning over, it won't stay upright, or it's maybe top heavy where wind might blow it over, then you can put on additional staking a little further out and not too tight, so that way it can sway a little bit in the breeze but not completely fall over. Again, using the minimum amount of support necessary. And then as the tree grows, the roots will anchor it more. Just come back and check on it, maybe every 6 months or something like that. And then as soon as it feels like it's firmly attached to the ground, the trunk's strong enough to stay upright, you can go ahead and remove those stakes. Because yeah, I like the way this question's phrased too. It says to promote a thicker trunk, and that's absolutely the issue. If we leave the stakes on too long, our tree will just go straight up, and it won't thicken the trunk at all. It's kind of like trees develop the same way people do. They need exercise to get stronger, and so those stakes being in the way of that. So hopefully that answers the question.
Great, thank you. Another thing I want to point out is that while we love doing webinars, we also love to do workshops in person, and we're hoping to offer those in person again next winter. And in the meantime, we also have other presentations in the summer on water-wise tree care and how to most efficiently water your trees in your landscape. So we welcome you to check those out as well.
Yeah.
And I would just add, if you have any other questions and you think of something after the fact, you're welcome to email us anytime. You can reach Alex directly. He has his email posted on the screen right now. And you can also contact our tree tips email, which is treetips@sactree.com. We just got one more question in. What is the right time to prune an ornamental pear tree?
I would say same as any other shade tree. So right about now is perfect. So yeah, January, February. Basically, the goal with pruning is you want the tree to be completely dormant, shed all its leaves, and you also want to do it before the buds start to wake up. So, when the tree wakes up in the spring, the leaves start to grow, but even before that a little bit, the buds start to kind of swell and open up and there's sap flowing through the tree. And so ideally you want to do it a little bit before that starts to happen, but otherwise pretty much anytime during the winter is good.
Wonderful. All right, well, I think we have gotten to all of our questions, and it has been exactly an hour like we hoped it would take. So again, if anyone has any other questions, please reach out to Alex or to our tree tips email. And in the meantime, we are going to stop recording, and this will be available on our YouTube channel sometime next week.
Yep. There was one question I wanted to jump back to.
Sure.
Vishnu had a question about banana. And I wanted to add on to Pam's answer there, which is that a banana is not really a tree from a botanical sense. It's actually just like a giant herbaceous plant or something, you know, it's all just leaves. It doesn't have wood the way a tree does. So I would not apply the lessons that we've gone over here to the banana, because its biology is totally different. And I actually don't know how you would really prune one, but I'm sure you can find some resources online maybe. I don't even know if they need pruning, maybe not. I think just like dead leaves, you can cut those off, but otherwise I'm not sure you need to do much else.
Great. Thank you for clarifying, Alex.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone so much for coming. I hope you all learned a lot. And yeah, again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And yeah, good luck with all your pruning adventures out there.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend, everyone.
All right. Goodbye.